On the gentle outskirts of a sleepy English village stood a quaint old cottage with ivy-covered walls and a garden that stretched out like a green sea dotted with blooms. This house, known as Rosehill Cottage, had seen many generations pass through its doors. But for the past few weeks, its walls had been whispering new secrets that only those small enough to hear them could understand. Inside a creaky cupboard behind the kitchen sink, hidden behind jars of dried rosemary and forgotten tins of treacle, lived a family no taller than a thimble. They called themselves the Thistlewhisps. Unlike any human family, the Thistlewhisps were tiny folk no bigger than a mouse's ear, and yet, their hearts were as grand as any tale told under a warm hearth. The family of four consisted of Alder, the inventive and quiet father who could carve a ladder from a matchstick, Sorrel, the spirited mother who kept their world spinning smoothly, and their two children, Wren, the endlessly curious daughter with a head full of questions, and Bram, a boy with a wild streak and a fondness for rolling down pencil sharpeners like they were mountains. They had lived peacefully inside that cupboard for many years, sharing stories by candlelight and dodging the occasional spider or scuttling beetle. The previous homeowners, a kindly elderly couple named the Weatherlys, had never discovered them. And that was just the way the Thistlewhisps liked it: safe, quiet, and unknown. But change had crept in like the first breeze of autumn. A month ago, the Weatherlys packed up their belongings into squeaky cardboard boxes and waved farewell to the only home they'd known for decades. In their place came a young woman named Eliza Grange and her 5-year-old daughter, Ivy. Unlike the slow-moving days of the past, Eliza and Ivy brought energy to the old cottage. Laughter now echoed through the rooms. Colorful rugs covered the wooden floors. Shelves were dusted and refilled. Curtains were replaced with bright linen drapes that danced in the wind. And with them came something else the Thistlewhisps had never known: curiosity. Ivy was unlike other human children. Her small hands were always reaching, exploring, poking into corners and crevices. She sang to her toys and spoke to the walls. More than once, Sorrel had to pull Wren away from the open cabinet door to avoid being seen. But despite the danger, there was something endearing about Ivy's laughter. Something almost inviting. Then came the biggest change of all. While exploring the upstairs hallway one morning, Bram discovered that the family's cupboard had been moved. He was nearly tossed from the tiny hammock he slept in when the entire shelf tilted and swayed. The Thistlewhisps huddled together, bracing themselves as the world shifted. When the chaos stopped and the light returned, they found themselves no longer inside the kitchen cabinet. No. They were in a room they had never seen before. A room with pastel walls, stacks of plush toys, and an enormous wooden dollhouse at the center larger than any home they could have ever imagined. The Thistlewhisps had been relocated to Ivy's bedroom. And not just to any part of it. Their cupboard now stood right next to the dollhouse. What happened next felt like fate. One afternoon, while Ivy played with blocks on the floor, the door of the dollhouse creaked open. A draft from the window had nudged it just enough. Inside was a grand interior of miniature rooms, tiny furnishings, even velvet curtains stitched with care. Sorrel stared at it in disbelief. It's a palace," she whispered. A whole city, Bram added, wide-eyed. It's a chance, Alder said softly, to begin again. That night, when Ivy had gone to bed and the house was still, the Thistlewhisps made their move. Using a ribbon from a forgotten gift box as a rope, they lowered themselves into the dollhouse. Wren squealed in delight as her feet touched the wooden floors. Bram darted across the rooms, testing out the minuscule beds and sliding down the spiral staircase. Sorrel examined the miniature kitchen, already imagining where to store their thimble cups. And Alder ran his hands along the walls, marveling at the craftsmanship. They chose the second floor as their new home base, converting the master bedroom into a cozy nest. The bed, though far too big, was soft and warm. The wooden windows opened just enough to let in a breeze. For the first time in years, they had sunlight that didn't come filtered through cupboard cracks. And more importantly, they had space. Glorious, golden space. From then on, the Thistlewhisps began building a new life inside the dollhouse. They padded the beds with cotton balls. They constructed shelves from popsicle sticks. Sorrel hung dried flower petals as tapestries. And every night, they gathered in the living room to tell stories of the old cupboard days, their voices echoing softly through the dollhouse walls. But one morning, something changed again. Alder was up early, inspecting a curious draft that had crept in through the bedroom window. He climbed up to the window sill, and what he saw took his breath away. The window was open just slightly. Just enough for someone very, very small to squeeze through. Outside lay a vast garden bathed in morning light. Daisies as tall as trees, blades of grass like towering green walls, and butterflies fluttering like flying dragons. He called for Sorrel, for Wren and Bram. They joined him at the window, their eyes wide with wonder. And in that moment, a decision was made. They would prepare. They would study. They would explore. For the first time in their lives, the Thistlewhisps would go beyond the walls. They would discover the garden. And so, a new chapter began. A golden morning spilled across Rose Hill Cottage. Sunlight streamed through the linen drapes of Ivy's bedroom, casting gentle rectangles onto the wooden floorboards. Dust particles danced lazily in the light, unaware that something extraordinary was unfolding beneath their glow. Inside the dollhouse, the Thistlewhisps were wide awake and buzzing with purpose. It had been 3 days since Alder first discovered the slightly open window that led to the great unknown, the garden. 3 days since they decided they would, at last, leave their wooden sanctuary and explore the wilderness beyond. But such a journey was no simple stroll. Alder sat cross-legged at the tiny wooden table in the dollhouse's study room, a splintered matchstick between his fingers as he meticulously sharpened it with a shard of glass. Around him were an assortment of items collected over the years, a paperclip bent into a grappling hook, a string of red embroidery thread to serve as rope, acorn caps for helmets, and tiny thimbles. 4 pots. Wren bounded in with an armful of parchment pieces torn from Ivy's storybooks. I found more maps, she chirped. The papers were far too large for her tiny frame, so she laid them flat on the floor and began sketching over them with charcoal shavings. "I think the tulip beds will be the safest place to land," she mused, pointing with a toothpick. "There's shade, cover, and possibly bugs we can make friends with." Sorrel, busy mending a backpack made from a folded tea bag, chuckled. "Let's hope the bugs are feeling friendly." Bram darted down the stairs from the attic, goggles made from clear plastic buttons strapped to his face and a clothespin rod slung over his shoulder like a sword. "I'm ready," he declared. "I trained with the dust bunnies under the bookshelf. I'm basically a warrior now." Sorrel raised an eyebrow. "Please don't duel the wildlife." Over the next few days, the dollhouse turned into a hive of organized chaos. Every family member had a task. Sorrel prepared the rations. She gathered tiny crumbs of shortbread Ivy had dropped by the windowsill, a dried berry from a forgotten muffin, and even snagged a droplet of honey from a saucer Ivy left out during pretend tea. Parties. Alder focused on transportation. The window gap was only an inch wide, perfect for their escape, but it was far above ground level. He reinforced a rope ladder made of embroidery thread, knotted tightly with pins and bits of lace. Bram helped test its strength by swinging from it like a wild squirrel, giggling the entire time. Wren, meanwhile, continued her research. When Ivy went to school, Wren would scamper across the vast books on the little girl's bed. One morning, she discovered an entire field guide to garden insects. Her eyes widened at pictures of beetles, snails, ants, and spiders. "Did you know," she whispered to Sorrel later, "that some ants will carry leaves many times their weight?" "Let's not give Bram any ideas," Sorrel murmured. "Too late," said Bram, overhearing. "I've already designed a saddle for one." The night before their journey, the Thistlewhisps sat together in the dollhouse's living room. The mood was a mix of excitement and nervous anticipation. A sliver of moonlight spilled through the miniature windows, illuminating Alder's face as he spoke. "This may be the greatest thing we've ever done," he said. "But it might also be dangerous. The garden isn't just flowers and sunshine. There are puddles deeper than lakes to us. Winds that could send us flying. And creatures who won't see us as guests." He looked at his children, their eyes wide but fearless. "But I believe we are ready. We've prepared, we've studied, and we have each other. That is more than most explorers could hope for." There was silence, then Wren's voice rose softly. "Can I bring the compass leaf?" Sorrel nodded. "Yes, love. And your courage too." Bram raised his makeshift sword. "Let's bring glory." "Let's bring caution," Sorrel countered with a smile. They went to bed early that night, each of them sleeping in their expedition clothes, patchwork capes made of silk ribbon, vests sewn from tea filters, belts of twisted floss. Outside the dollhouse, the wind rustled gently, as if whispering its approval. The next morning, the adventure began. Alder was the first to climb the rope ladder, scaling the thread one careful knot at a time until he reached the open window ledge. The breeze ruffled his hair. He turned and gave the signal. Wren followed, then Sarl, then Bram, who of course insisted on going last to guard the rear. One by one, they stood together at the precipice between safety and the unknown. Below them stretched a vast green wilderness. From this height, the garden was an entire world. Towering blades of grass swayed like jungle vines. Dewdrops shimmered like crystal orbs. In the distance, a butterfly flitted through the morning air, its wings glowing in the light. Alder tied the other end of the ladder to a tack driven into the frame. He gave it a firm tug. Secure. He looked at Sarl, who nodded once, then turned to the children. "This is it," she said. Wren took the first step onto the ladder, heart pounding. The thread creaked gently beneath her, but held strong. Below, the flow orbit seemed like another planet. As she descended, she thought of all the things they might see: ants with armor like shells, puddles that sparkled like lakes, tunnels under roots, maybe even a kind beetle who could show them the way. And maybe, just maybe, this wasn't just an expedition. Maybe it was the start of something far bigger than any of them could imagine. The Thistlewhisps descended the rope ladder one by one, each step bringing them closer to the unknown. The thread ladder, though swaying in the soft breeze, held strong beneath their weightless bodies. Below them lay a patch of soft earth and fallen petals, the first edge of the garden they had only ever dreamed about. When Wren's feet finally touched the soil, she gasped. Everything was enormous. To her left towered a stalk of lavender, its purple blossoms buzzing faintly with the lazy hum of bees. To her right, a curled dandelion leaf as wide as a blanket arched above the ground like a sheltering cave. The dirt beneath her shoes was moist and spongy, each grain like a boulder. "It smells like sunshine," she whispered. Sarl landed behind her, brushing the dust off her patchwork cloak. "It smells like possibility." Alder followed, eyes sweeping the terrain. "And danger," he added with a cautious note. Finally, Bram landed with a triumphant tally-ho. And immediately rolled into the grass, arms flung wide. "I'm one with the wild now." "Please don't eat any bugs," Sarl muttered. They gathered beneath a clump of buttercups that shone like golden suns overhead. This patch of the garden was full of color and light, a place where shadows danced and breeze played gentle songs through the grass blades. Wren took out her leaf map, now slightly crumpled from the descent. "If we keep the rosemary bush behind us, the tulip grove should be east." "How do you know which way is east?" Bram asked. "Because the sun rose over there," she pointed confidently. Alder smiled. "Good observation, explorer." They set off in a line, with Sarl leading, Alder watching the rear, and the children in the middle. The journey began quietly, with only the crunch of tiny footsteps on bark chips and the distant chirps of garden birds overhead. but it wasn't long before they encountered their first surprise. A soft rumble vibrated beneath their feet. Wren froze. "Do you feel that?" Then it came, a massive shape trundling through the grass toward them. The ground shook gently with every step. The Thistlewhisps dove behind a curled hosta leaf just as the creature emerged. It was a tortoise. To them, it looked like a lumbering green hill with eyes. Its legs, like pillars, moved in slow determination. On its shell were patches of moss, bits of leaves, and a small daisy growing out of a crack like a flag on a ship. "Should we run?" whispered Bram, clutching his rod spear. "No," Alder whispered back. "It's not hunting. It's grazing." Sure enough, the tortoise lumbered past them, nosed a piece of lettuce, and continued its way toward the compost pile. Wren's eyes sparkled. "That was incredible. Imagine what else lives out here," Sorrel murmured. As if answering her, a bright shimmer passed overhead. They looked up to see a dragonfly gliding on translucent wings, the sun catching its body like a shard of blue glass. It zipped and looped, pausing in mid-air before darting away. "That could have carried Bram," Wren whispered. "I volunteer next time," Bram shouted. They continued walking, weaving between marigold stems and ducking under drooping tulip petals. The deeper they ventured, the wilder it became. Suddenly, they came upon a strange sight, a ring of mushrooms growing in a perfect circle around a mossy patch of ground. At the center stood a cracked marble, no doubt dropped by ivy weeks ago, now half buried and glowing faintly in the sunlight. Wren stepped closer. "It's a fairy ring," she breathed. "I read about these. Some say if you step inside, you'll be whisked away." Alder put a gentle hand on her shoulder. "And others say it's a boundary. A meeting point between our world and another." They didn't step inside, not this time, but Bram dropped a tiny acorn into the center just to see what happens. Nothing did. At least, not yet. The sun was climbing higher now, and the heat began to press on them. Sorrel suggested they find shade. A little further ahead, they discovered a perfect resting place, the hollowed shell of a long-lost walnut, resting in the grass like a tiny hut. Inside, it smelled earthy and warm. They sat together, drinking droplets of dew from curled leaves and nibbling at their travel rations. Wren took out her notebook, a square of paper folded 12 times, and began drawing what they had seen. "The tortoise is definitely the king of the garden," she said seriously. "I think the dragonfly is a sky knight," Bram countered. "And the mushroom ring?" asked Sorrel. "Maybe a gate," Wren said slowly. "To somewhere else." As they rested, a sudden rustling startled them. From a nearby clump of clover, a tiny voice called out, "You're not from around here, are you?" The Thistlewhisps turned, startled. Out stepped a beetle. It wore a shard of seashell on its back like armor and had a tiny monocle made of glass bead. Its antennae twitched politely. "My name is Reginald Pollenbrush," he said with a slight bow. "Ambassador of the North Petal District." Bram's jaw dropped. "The bugs have governments." Reginald ignored the interruption. "I sensed newcomers. Very few folk arrive through the northern window. Are you explorers?" Alder exchanged glances with Sarl, then nodded. "Yes. From the house." "Ah, housefolk," Reginald said knowingly. "We do not see many these days." He stepped forward with purpose. "There is much for you to learn. And much for you to see. But beware. Not all corners of the garden are so welcoming." His voice dropped. "There are shadows beneath the leaves. And not everything that crawls wants to share." With that, he turned and disappeared back into the clover. The Thistlewhisps sat in stunned silence. "Well," Bram said finally, "that was awesome." Wren shivered, despite the sun. Sarl looked up at the towering flowers and rustling leaves. "We've only just begun," she said quietly. "And already, the garden feels much larger than we imagined." The sun was dipping lower in the sky, casting amber hues across the towering plants that surrounded the Thistlewhisps like a great emerald jungle. Shadows stretched long across the soft earth, and the once inviting garden had begun to change. The family had ventured deeper into the tulip grove, following Reginald Pollenbrush's departure with curiosity and caution. Though the beetle's warning echoed in their minds, they couldn't resist the thrill of discovery. Every new petal and pebble was like unearthing a hidden treasure. But as with all treasures, there were traps too. Wren was sketching the silhouette of a bumblebee nest hanging high in a hollyhock, while Bram poked a blade of grass with his rod spear, pretending it was a swamp beast. Sarl and Alder walked side by side, whispering quietly about which direction to take next. They came upon a patch of tall grass, tall even by garden standards. Each blade curved overhead like the arches of a cathedral. It was quiet in this part of the garden. Too quiet. "We should turn back," Alder said after a pause. "Just 5 more minutes," Wren pleaded, her eyes catching a glint of light ahead. "There's something shiny in there." They followed her, single file, Bram humming a hero's anthem behind them. As they stepped through the curtain of grass, a sudden gust of wind roared past, lifting loose petals, shaking stems, and snapping one of their breadcrumbs off Wren's pack. Then came the real trouble. "Wait, where's the rope ladder marker?" Sarl asked, turning. The thread-thin red marker they had tied to a dandelion stem was gone. Torn clean by the wind. The grass looked the same in every direction. North, south, east, all lost in a maze of green. They were officially lost. Panic stirred in the children's eyes, but Sarl raised her voice gently. "All right. No need to fret. We'll retrace our steps. Except the wind had erased every clue. Alder knelt and dug his fingers into the soil. We'll camp here until we get our bearings. It'll be dark soon. Just as he said that, a low rustling echoed from the undergrowth behind them. The family froze. Bram gripped his makeshift spear. Please let it be a friendly bug. But out of the grass stepped something else entirely. A snail. Huge. Towering. Its glistening shell spiraled like a stone castle, its antennae waving curiously in the air. Its movement was slow but assured, and its eyes bulbous and oddly wise blinked lazily at the stunned Thistlewhisps. Oh, Wren whispered, half in awe, half in dread. But the snail did not attack. Instead, it paused, observing them like a curious librarian noticing new guests. Then, to their astonishment, it lowered its head, revealing a small saddle strapped onto its back, woven from spider silk and moss. Someone had been riding it. Suddenly, from behind the snail's shell, a tiny figure emerged. Draped in a robe made of leaf fabric, with boots fashioned from bark and a staff carved from a rose thorn, the stranger bowed deeply. "Greetings," she said, voice like wind through reeds. "I am Lysandra of the Deep Bloom Circle. You are far from safe grounds, housefolk." The Thistlewhisp stared. You ride snails." Bram managed. Lysandra gave a faint smile. "Only those who offer their blessing." Wren stepped forward. "We were exploring. We're new here." "Many are," Lysandra replied. "Few last beyond the shadow ferns. You're lucky you wandered into the snail's glade. Most who wander west at dusk do not return." Sorrel nodded with concern. "We were looking for a way back." Lysandra turned to her snail. "Then you shall ride. The path is safer with one who knows the routes." Within minutes, the Thistlewhisps found themselves atop the shell of the giant mollusk, nestled in the moss saddle. The ride was smooth and strangely calming, the snail gliding across leaves like a living boat on green water. From that elevated height, they saw the garden with new eyes, a tapestry of life. Ants marching in symmetrical rows. A spider weaving a web that shimmered like crystal in fading light. A pair of ladybugs dancing atop a milkweed bloom. The garden wasn't just a place, it was a kingdom, with rules and secrets. As they journeyed, Lysandra shared them. "There is the burrow market beneath the rose hedge, where beetles trade dew for lichen," she said. "The firefly courts hold council at twilight. And deep beneath the pond lies the hollow root, home of the weaver queen." Bram was enthralled. "Can we visit all of it?" Lysandra's expression darkened. "You may. But you must not go east of the ivy wall." "Why not?" Wren asked. because something old sleeps there. And the garden does not speak of it. They traveled in silence for a while after that. By the time the snail slowed to a stop, the sky was shifting into night. The moon had risen, silver and watchful, casting long shadows through the petals. Before them stood the familiar lavender stalks of the upper garden home. "You must return to the house," Lysandra said gently. "But return again, when the sun is kind. The garden remembers those who walk with respect." Alder bowed. "Thank you, Lysandra." The snail blinked once, then turned and melted into the grass, disappearing like a dream. Back inside the dollhouse, the Thistlewhisps sat around a thread spool table, drinking warm tea made from rosewater drops. Their hearts were still racing, minds spinning with wonder. They had been lost. They had been found. They had met the garden's mysteries. And they would go back. Next time, not as wanderers, but as explorers. Dawn had barely stretched her golden fingers across the windowsill when Wren awoke with a fluttering heart. She sat up in the thimble bed, blinking at the soft light pouring through the tiny dollhouse window. The familiar shapes of her parents and Bram lay curled beneath blankets stitched from bits of Ivy's doll clothes, all still lost in dreams. But not Wren. Today, she couldn't sleep. She tiptoed across the wooden floor, careful not to creak the stairwell. Her notebook lay waiting on the windowsill desk, a folded paper square covered in careful sketches of last night's journey, the snail, the towering grass, and the cloaked figure of Lysandra. She'd written every detail she could remember, from the shimmer of moss on the saddle to the way the moonlight had filtered through the tulip petals like stained glass. They had promised to return. Now, it was time to keep that promise. As sunlight spilled into the room, Sorrel stirred. Soon, the others awoke as well. Alder stretched and yawned. Bram nearly rolled off his hammock, muttering something about taming bees in his sleep. When Wren proposed returning to the garden, no one hesitated. But this time, Sorrel said, tightening the strap of her bark buckle belt, "We pack more than dreams." They carried acorn flask water, crumb bread wrapped in rose petals, and 2 sharpened matchsticks for climbing. Bram insisted on bringing a spool of thread just in case we meet a web weaver. Alder brought a small magnifying lens, which once belonged to Ivy's toy detective set, now refashioned into a scope. With packs loaded, they descended the rope ladder again, hearts lighter, steps surer. The garden greeted them like an old friend. The breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle. Ladybugs dotted leaves like red lanterns. A blue jay called distantly from beyond a hedge. But they didn't linger. They followed the path Lysandra had shown them, past the buttercup glade, beneath the fern canopy, and around the fairy ring that still shimmered with something unseen. This time, Lysandra was waiting. She stood beside her snail companion, hands resting on the spiral shell, as if expecting their return all along. "You came," she said simply. "Of course," Wren replied. Lysandra gave a small nod. Then follow me. It is market day. They traveled deeper into the garden than before, through winding tunnels formed by roots and burrows. The light dimmed. The air grew thick with the scent of earth, spice, and petals. Finally, they arrived. The burrow market revealed itself like a dream painted into soil. Nestled beneath a sprawling rosebush, the market hummed with life. Glowworms lined the arched entry tunnel like lanterns. Stalls carved into root hollows glowed with soft light. Beetles in polished shell armor guarded entrances. Crickets chattered in corners, bartering for mushroom caps and berry seeds. The Thistlewhisps could hardly believe their eyes. "Welcome," Lysandra said, sweeping her hand out. "To the heart of the underground." Each member of the family wandered, wide-eyed. Sorrel examined a stall selling dew vials infused with flower essence. Alder studied a map vendor who etched roots onto birch bark scrolls using thorn ink. Wren followed her nose to a baker beetle who offered petal pie slivers and pollen-dusted sweets. She traded a paperclip pendant for a thimbleful of hibiscus tart. Bram, of course, found trouble. He tried to climb onto the shell of a slumbering roach merchant, believing it was a battle mount. The merchant awoke with a grunt, and only Lysandra's timely interruption saved Bram from being banned from the market altogether. "There are rules here," Lysandra whispered to him later. "Not all who smile are kind." Meanwhile, in the heart of the market stood a great stump. Atop it, a silver-winged dragonfly conducted an auction, speaking with regal authority. Insect wings buzzed as trades were made: bark scrolls for sunstone, dandelion fluff for sapphire raindrops. Alder approached one elder cricket at a lore stand and asked, "How long has this place existed?" The cricket blinked slowly, his voice rasping like wind through reeds. "Longer than the house folk remember. This market was born the moment the first flower fell. It changes, moves, grows, but always returns." As the day wore on, the Thistlewhisps made small trades. Wren received a compass seed set to turn toward starlight. Sorrel exchanged half a spool of ribbon for a singing pebble that emitted a soft chime when near running water. Then came the whisper. A shadowed corner. A rustling behind the honey drop stall. Wren turned to see a strange figure cloaked, hunched, with glinting eyes like drops of ink. "You seek more than maps and sweets, little leaf," the voice rasped. Wren froze. "You seek the ivy wall." She swallowed. "How do you know that?" But the figure had vanished. She turned to Lysandra, suddenly uneasy. "What is east of the ivy wall?" Wren asked again. Lysandra's face grew somber. "A place even the sunlight forgets." Before Wren could question further, a low bell tolled through the burrow market. The glowworms began to dim. Stalls shut their tiny curtains. Ants gathered their carts. The market was closing. Lysandra turned to the Thistlewhisps. It's time you returned. As they ascended back toward the light, Wren glanced once more behind her. The strange figure was gone. But the message remained. Something was calling. Something old. That night, in the dollhouse, Wren opened her notebook again. She drew the market, the glowworms, the compass seed, and finally, the ivy wall. Its outline was jagged, towering, impossible. But below it, she wrote just one word. Soon. It began with a dream. Wren stood in the garden, but it was not the garden she knew. The flowers bowed toward her, their petals twitching like lips trying to speak. The soil pulsed beneath her feet, breathing like a sleeping beast. A wind silent and cold blew from the east. And from beyond a wall of ivy taller than trees, a voice called. Not loud. Not urgent. Just, there. A whisper brushing the edge of waking. She opened her eyes. The dollhouse was still. Morning had not yet touched the window-sill. Bram snored softly in the room below. Sorrel and Alder lay side by side, their faces calm. But Wren felt it in her chest a pull, like the tide drawing back from shore. She knew what they had to do. When Wren told her family about the dream, Sorrel looked troubled. You said it called to you? She asked. Wren nodded. It didn't feel evil. Just, forgotten. Alder sat back, thoughtful. Lysandra warned us. The ivy wall isn't just a boundary. It's a memory. Bram, wide-eyed, perked up. Are we going there? No, Sorrel said immediately. It's too far. Too dangerous. But Wren met her gaze, firm. I think, we already said yes. That afternoon, they packed light. Just the essentials, the compass seed, dried flour bread, a petal lantern that glowed when warmed by touch, and Bram's ever-present rod spear. They left a note for Lysandra, tucked in the moss saddle of her snail, we'll be careful. We promise. Then they turned east. The air grew still the farther they walked. Past the burrow market trails, past the mushroom glades, the garden changed. It grew darker, quieter, as though even the ants chose not to travel this way. The plants were different here. Not dead, but older. Wilder. Twisting ivy curled up fence posts and tangled through tree roots. Fungi with bioluminescent glows lit the path, but not warmly. It was like stepping into a dream half forgotten by the waking world. And then they saw it. The ivy wall. It rose before them like a fortress of green, living and breathing. Vines thick as ropes pulsed faintly with sap. Leaves shifted without wind. Along its surface, strange markings were etched in patterns that weren't quite letters. Wren stepped closer. The compass seed in her pocket spun wildly. "I think, this is it," she whispered. They stood in awe. Then Alder, voice quiet, said, "There's a door." Indeed, hidden among the curling vines was a wooden arch, almost invisible unless one looked closely. The wood was old, moss-eaten, but the shape of a handle could still be seen beneath years of growth. Bram reached out. "Don't," Sarl started, but too late. He touched it, and the door opened. No sound. No resistance. Just the silent parting of vines, revealing a tunnel of woven ivy, glowing faintly from within. The Thistlewhisps exchanged glances. Then entered. Inside, the world changed. There was no soil beneath their feet, only soft moss, springy like memory foam. The walls pulsed with green light, and whispers swam through the air. Not words, but sounds, laughs, songs, echoes of footsteps that weren't theirs. "It's a memory tunnel," Ren said, heart racing. "How do you know?" Bram asked. "Because I remember it. But I've never been here." The passage led them into a dome-like chamber where a tree grew upside down from the ceiling, its roots spiraling downward like chandeliers. At its center stood a small pedestal stone, ancient, carved with the same markings seen on the wall outside. Upon it lay a book. No bigger than a coin. Its pages fluttered despite the still air. Alder approached first. "It's made of leaf skin," he murmured. Ren leaned in. On the first page was a single word. "Arathri." "What's that?" Bram asked. But no one could answer. Suddenly, the lantern flickered. The chamber dimmed. From the shadows stepped a figure cloaked in ivy. She, or perhaps it, moved without sound. Her face was not seen, hidden behind a veil of green leaves, but her presence filled the air like scent after rainfall. "You are not of this cycle," she said, voice echoing like wind through stones. "But you carry its name." Sarl took a cautious step forward. "We're explorers. From the house. We didn't mean to trespass." "No trespass." "You were called," the figure replied. She extended a hand toward the book. "It remembers what the garden forgets. The first bloom. The buried root. The pact that broke the breath of flowers." Ren's fingers brushed the cover. A pulse shot through her, as if every leaf in the garden had exhaled at once. Visions bloomed behind her eyes, a younger garden, wild and untamed, insects speaking like sages, a storm that burned the skies, and a promise sealed beneath the ivy wall. What is Arathri?" she asked aloud. The figure's voice dropped. "The name of the garden. Its true name. Forgotten by those who live within it. Remembered by those who left." Sarl's eyes widened. left. You are not the first housefolk, the figure whispered. Your kind once spoke with petals, danced with vines, but they chose walls, roofs, dolls, forgetting what once was shared. The light faded. Take the book, the figure said. Its story is not finished. Then she vanished. No sound. No sign. Only the scent of crushed ivy. Outside, the sun was setting. The thistlewhisps emerged from the wall, blinking in the golden light. The garden, their garden, stretched before them, familiar and strange all at once. Wren clutched the book, heart heavy. They had thought themselves explorers. But now, they were part of something older. Something that had been waiting. And in the book's final page, blank and waiting, Wren knew. They would be the ones to write what comes next. Back in the safety of the dollhouse, the thistlewhisps gathered around the small wooden table. The ancient book lay open before them, its delicate pages glowing faintly in the dim light. The strange leaf skin cover still pulsed softly, as if alive. Wren traced her finger over the word Arathri written on the first page. What do you think it means? She whispered. Alder adjusted his tiny spectacles and examined the intricate symbols decorating the book's margins. I believe it's the original name of the garden. The name given by the first beings who lived here before even the insects. Sorrel nodded thoughtfully. The book might be a record, or a key. Bram leaned forward, eyes wide. A key to what? Before anyone could answer, the pages began to turn on their own, revealing illustrations unlike any they had seen before, swirling vines woven into patterns, animals that looked part flower, part creature, and a great tree whose roots wrapped the world. Wren gasped. It's a map, she said, pointing to a sprawling diagram with lines and symbols. A map of the garden before. Alder's voice was grave. Before what? Sorrel tapped her chin. Before the Great Change. The book revealed stories, how the garden was once a living being, united by an ancient pact between flora and fauna. How its heart beat with magic, and every creature, great or small, was part of the whole. And then a rift. A breaking of the pact. A silence. We need to learn more, Wren said fiercely. But as the night deepened, a shadow crept beyond the windows of the dollhouse. Outside, something watched, waiting. The days following their discovery of Arathri were filled with restless nights and hurried whispers. The thistlewhisps pored over the ancient book, uncovering fragments of a forgotten past where magic and life intertwined in a delicate balance. Each page brought new riddles, mysterious symbols, and haunting tales of the garden's origins. One evening, as twilight settled over Rosehill Cottage, Wren sat by the window, the book open on her lap. Her eyes traced the delicate script, trying to decipher the meaning of the great bloom, a cataclysmic event hinted at in the text, said to have fractured the harmony of the garden. Suddenly, a chill swept through the room, carrying with it a faint whisper. Wren's heart skipped as she turned to see shadows flickering just beyond the glass. "It's starting," she murmured. That night, strange noises echoed around the dollhouse. The soft rustling of leaves, low growls carried on the wind, and distant cries of unknown creatures. Bram clutched his spear tighter, eyes wide in the darkness. "The garden remembers," Alder said gravely. "And something remembers us." The family gathered in the living room, where Sorrel lit a circle of flower petal candles, their soft glow pushing back the creeping darkness. "We must prepare," Sorrel said. "The balance is fragile, and the shadows are waking." Over the next few days, the Thistlewhisps ventured cautiously outside, noticing the subtle changes, flowers that drooped as if in sorrow, insects that fled at their approach, and a creeping mist that seemed to seep from the ivy-covered wall. One afternoon, while exploring near the Borough Market, they encountered an old ladybug named Maribel. Her shell was chipped, and her eyes held the weight of many seasons. "You tread dangerous paths, little ones," she warned. "The veil thins, and the nightshade stalks." "Nightshade?" Wren asked. Maribel nodded. "A creature born of shadow and silence, bound to the broken pact. It hungers for the garden's forgotten magic." As night fell, the garden's usual lullaby turned into a haunting symphony of whispers and sighs. The Thistlewhisps knew their adventure had taken a darker turn, and their courage would be tested in ways they had never imagined. The garden was no longer the serene sanctuary the Thistlewhisps had once known. Each dawn revealed new signs of unease. The petals of once vibrant flowers wilted before the sun even rose, and the buzzing chorus of bees grew silent, replaced by an eerie stillness that hung heavy in the air. Wren stood by the dollhouse window, clutching the ancient book Arathri. Her fingers trembled as she traced the faded symbols that spoke of the veil, the thin boundary between light and shadow that now frayed dangerously. "We can't wait any longer," she whispered to Alder as he sharpened a tiny toothpick into a spear. He nodded solemnly. "The nightshade grows stronger with each passing day. If we don't act, the garden could fall into eternal darkness." Sorrel packed their supplies with careful hands: dried rose petals for light, a vial of honey to soothe wounds, and a length of spider silk for binding. Bram, eager and restless, spun his spear between his fingers. "Let's track it down," he said with fierce determination. "Show this shadow beast the strength of the Thistlewhisps." Before they set off, Lysandra arrived without warning, riding atop her great snail. Her eyes held a solemnity that silenced all. "You seek to hunt the nightshade," she said. "Few have faced it and lived to tell the tale. But you are brave. And the garden's fate may rest with you." Together, they followed the whispering paths beyond the ivy wall. The deeper into the garden they ventured, the thicker the shadows became. Ivy tendrils twisted like serpents, and the air grew cold and damp. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the underbrush. From the darkness, a shape emerged, tall, lithe, and cloaked in swirling shadows that seemed to consume the light around it. Its eyes glowed a fierce violet, piercing through the gloom. The Nightshade. Bram charged forward, spear raised. The creature responded with a flicker of tendrils, striking with unnatural speed. Sorrel threw rose petals that burst into sparks, momentarily blinding the beast. Wren, clutching the book, whispered an ancient incantation. She had uncovered a melody of growth and light. The ground beneath the Nightshade shimmered, vines erupting to entangle it. But the creature howled, breaking free and retreating into the deepest thickets. Panting, the Thistlewhisps regrouped. "This is only the beginning," Alder said. "We must learn more about its weakness." Lysandra revealed a hidden glade where the oldest tree, the heartroot, stood. Legend said its sap could heal any wound and dispel darkness. Their quest to find the heartroot was perilous through tangled brambles, across moss-covered stones slippery with dew, and past whispering shadows that sought to mislead. When they finally reached the ancient tree, its bark glowed faintly with an inner light. Sorrel collected the sap, sealing it carefully. As they prepared to leave, Wren heard a soft voice carried on the wind, a warning and a promise. "The garden's heart beats in your hands. Protect it, or lose all." The battle for the garden had only just begun. The soft glow of dawn barely touched the garden when the Thistlewhisp set out from the ancient heartroot tree, its precious sap safely stored in a thimble vial. The air hummed with both promise and danger, as if the garden itself held its breath. Alder led the way, his eyes sharp, fingers lightly brushing the leaves as if reading the whispers they held. Sorrel followed closely, clutching the vial, while Wren and Bram flanked them, alert and ready. "The Nightshade won't wait for us to grow stronger," Alder murmured. "We need allies, knowledge, and perhaps, a miracle." Their first destination was the Burrow Market, where they hoped to find the elder cricket who had spoken of ancient garden lore, a sage named Thistledown. The journey took them through dew-dappled meadows and under arches of wildflowers swaying in a gentle breeze. But even amidst such beauty, shadows lurked, long tendrils of creeping mist curling between petals and thorn. As they entered the bustling market, the lively chatter of insects greeted them, a sharp contrast to the tension gripping the family. Vendors hawked wares carved from seeds and petals, traders bartered glowworm lanterns for spider silk thread. Thistledown awaited them in a quiet nook, his antennae twitching thoughtfully as he examined the vial. "The heartroot's sap," he said, voice gravelly with age. "A rare gift indeed. It can mend what darkness wounds, but only if wielded with pure intent." Wren stepped forward. "How do we defeat the Nightshade?" "It's more than just a shadow, it's a living darkness." Thistledown nodded solemnly. "The Nightshade is born of broken promises and forgotten songs. To truly defeat it, you must heal the garden's heart, restore the pact that once bound all life in harmony." Sorrel's eyes shone. "How?" "A trial," Thistledown said. "A test of courage, wisdom, and heart. You must seek the 3 lost blossoms, each hidden in places touched by the garden's sorrow. He produced a brittle map marked with cryptic symbols. The first blossom lies in the mire of murmurs, a place where voices of the past echo. The second, beneath the crystal dew falls, guarded by silent watchers. The third, atop the withered spire, where light and shadow meet. Bram grinned, gripping his spear tighter. Sounds like an adventure. The family agreed without hesitation, knowing the fate of the garden rested on their success. Their path led first to the mire of murmurs, a swampy expanse shrouded in mist and memories. The ground squelched beneath their feet, and faint voices drifted on the breeze, soft cries of forgotten flowers and lost creatures. Wren shivered but pressed on, clutching the book Arathri for guidance. Strange shapes flickered at the edges of the mist, will-o'-the-wisps leading or misleading, no one could tell. Suddenly, a deep rumble echoed. From the murky waters emerged a figure, a colossal dragonfly, its wings shimmering like stained glass, eyes glowing with ancient wisdom. "I am Elindra," she spoke, voice like chimes on the wind. "To pass the mire, you must answer the riddle of the forgotten bloom." She recited. "I am born when the sun does not shine. My petals dark yet forever divine. In silence I grow, in shadow I thrive. What am I, that keeps the garden alive?" Wren thought, then whispered, "The nightshade itself. Darkness nurtures it, yet it's part of the garden's cycle." Elindra's eyes sparkled. "You see beyond fear. Proceed." They retrieved the first lost blossom, a dark violet flower pulsating with faint light, nestled beneath twisted roots. Next, they journeyed to the crystal dew falls, a shimmering cascade of water droplets hanging like jewels from a cliff of moss. Silent watchers, delicate spider queens with eyes like pearls, guarded the falls. Sorrel approached carefully, offering a bloom from the heartroot. The spiders accepted, allowing the family to pass and gather the second lost blossom, a crystalline white petal that hummed softly. Finally, they ascended the withered spire, a towering stalk of blackened rose entwined with silver thorns. At its summit, where sunlight met shadow, they found the last lost blossom, a golden flower burning with gentle flame. But as Wren reached to pluck it, the nightshade appeared, its violet eyes blazing. "You cannot mend what was broken," it hissed. The battle that followed was fierce. Bram's spear clashed with tendrils of darkness, Sorrel's petals flared in a protective blaze, and Alder's voice rose in an ancient chant from Arathri. Wren held the lost blossoms high, their light weaving together to form a radiant shield. With a final howl, the nightshade shattered like smoke in sunlight. Silence fell. The garden breathed. The pact was restored. The heartroot glowed brighter than ever, its sap flowing freely. The Thistlewhisps knew their journey was far from over, but for the first time, hope blossomed like the flowers around them. The garden, once cloaked in shadow and silence, now hummed softly with newfound life. The restoration of the ancient pact echoed through every leaf and petal, awakening whispers of magic that had lain dormant beneath the soil for countless seasons. Yet, the air carried a promise renewal came not without price. As dawn painted the skies in shades of rose and gold, the Thistlewhisps stirred from their beds in the dollhouse, senses tingling with the pulse of the garden's rebirth. Wren, eyes bright and eager, was the first to step outside, breath catching at the sight that awaited them. Where once wilted blooms had hung heavy with despair, vibrant flowers now reached eagerly toward the sun. Streams of dew sparkled like scattered gems along the blades of grass. Even the oldest trees seemed to sigh with relief, their branches swaying gently in a breeze scented with hope. Sorrel gathered the family beneath the old walnut shell shelter, a sacred meeting place they had long called home. "The garden awakens," she said softly, "but so too do those who guard its deepest secrets." Before they could question, a ripple passed through the air, a shimmering curtain of light that shimmered and pulsed like liquid crystal. From within it emerged figures, ethereal and tall, clad in garments woven from moonlight and morning mist. Their eyes gleamed with ageless wisdom, and their presence radiated a calm strength. "These are the guardians," Alder whispered, awestruck. The eldest of the guardians stepped forward, voice like a gentle river. "We are the keepers of the garden's balance," she said. "Your courage and heart have rekindled the pact, but the journey is far from complete. Darkness lingers still, in places untouched by light." Wren felt her heart quicken. "What must we do?" The guardian smiled. "You must journey to the four corners of the garden, places where the pact's magic was most deeply fractured. There, you will face trials to prove your worth and renew the bonds between all life." Bram's eyes sparkled with excitement and resolve. "And if we succeed, you will become part of the garden's story, its living memory," the guardian replied. "But beware, the trials test not just strength, but wisdom, compassion, and sacrifice." Their first trial awaited at the Whispering Hollow, a cavern beneath the oldest oak, where voices of past guardians echoed through the stone. There, they would face illusions that challenged their fears and truths. As the day waned, the Thistlewhisps set forth toward the Whispering Hollow, guided by the guardian's subtle glow. Along the path, they encountered creatures both familiar and strange, a chorus of crickets whose song shifted with the wind, a curious foxglove sprite with laughter like wind chimes, and a pair of luminescent moths that danced just beyond reach. Upon reaching the hollow, a cavernous mouth gaped beneath gnarled roots, its depths swallowed in shadow. The air inside hummed with power, and the echoes of long-past voices stirred. Wren led the way, clutching Arathri tightly. As they stepped inside, shadows danced and shapes shifted, phantoms of memory and doubt. Each faced visions drawn from their deepest fears. Sorrel saw the withering of her family's legacy, Alder confronted the loss of knowledge, Bram battled shadows that whispered of failure, and Wren faced a mirror that questioned her worth. But united, they overcame each trial, their bonds of love and trust strengthening with every challenge. Emerging into the twilight, the guardians awaited with nods of approval. "You have taken the first step," the eldest said. "The path ahead is perilous, but your hearts are true." With renewed hope, the family prepared for the trials still to come, knowing that the fate of the garden and perhaps beyond rested in their tiny hands. As twilight cloaked Rose Hill Cottage in shades of indigo and silver, the garden thrummed with a resonance that echoed through every leaf and root. The Thistlewhisps, now weary yet unbowed, stood at the heart of the ancient garden where their journey had begun, a place where past and future intertwined in a dance as old as time itself. The trials had tested them beyond measure. They had faced shadows of doubt, deciphered riddles whispered by forgotten blooms, and walked paths woven from light and darkness. With each step, they had rekindled the garden's fading magic, restoring the fragile threads of the everlasting pact. Before them stood the everlasting bloom, an ethereal flower, luminescent and alive, its petals shimmering with the colors of dawn and dusk. It pulsed with the very essence of the garden's soul, a beacon of hope and renewal. Lysandra appeared once more, her eyes reflecting the garden's ancient wisdom. "The everlasting bloom," she said softly, "holds the final key. To truly restore the pact, you must offer a piece of yourselves, your memories, your dreams, your courage." Wren stepped forward, heart pounding. She recalled every moment of their journey, the fear, the wonder, the love that had bound them through every trial. With a trembling hand, she plucked a petal from the bloom. As it touched her skin, visions flooded her mind, memories of the garden's birth, the harmony lost, and the promise reborn. Sorrel, alder, bram, and wren joined hands, each offering a fragment of their being to the flower. The petals glowed brighter, swirling with colors that defied description. A gentle wind swept through the garden, carrying their offerings into the soil, where roots drank deeply of the light and hope. The everlasting bloom unfurled fully, releasing a cascade of shimmering pollen that drifted across the garden like a soft rain. Flowers awakened, colors deepened, and the air filled with melodies sung by unseen creatures. The garden breathed anew. As the last light faded, the Thistlewhisps felt a warmth within, a bond unbroken. A story continued. "You are no longer just visitors," Lysandra spoke, her voice a melody. "You are its heart, its guardians, its living memory." From that moment, the garden and the family were forever intertwined. Their tale became legend, whispered by leaves and sung by the wind. And under the watchful stars, the Thistlewhisps knew one truth: that in the smallest hands lie the greatest powers, and in the quietest hearts, the loudest courage. The garden would forever bloom, because they had dared to believe. Title: The Thistlewhisps and the Garden of Forgotten Whispers. Description: in a quaint English cottage, hidden behind a humble cupboard, lives the tiny Thistlewhisps family, no bigger than a thimble but with hearts full of courage and wonder. When their peaceful home is upended by new residents, the family embarks on an extraordinary adventure into the vast and magical garden beyond the windowsill. Guided by ancient secrets hidden in a mysterious book called Arathri, and aided by enigmatic allies like the snail-riding Lysandra, the Thistlewhisps face shadowy creatures and unravel forgotten pacts that bind the garden's life together. From the bustling underground borough market to the towering ivy wall and the trials of the Whispering Hollow, their journey tests their bravery, wisdom, and love. As darkness threatens to consume their world, the family must seek the legendary lost blossoms, confront the haunting nightshade, and restore the everlasting bloom to renew the garden's magic. This enchanting tale explores the power of small beings to make a mighty difference, weaving themes of courage, unity, and the timeless bond between nature and memory. Join the Thistlewhisps as they discover that even the tiniest of hands can hold the greatest power and that hope can bloom in the most unexpected places.